Facebook? Because if you are, this is my pilot to become a YouTube star. I'm going to answer some of your questions, and I'm going to perform sex acts in front of the camera. Hope you're not too uncomfortable with that. I'm Lee Goldberg. I'm the author of the new book. It's not here, but you have to take my word for it. The new book, Lost Hills, which is oh, here it is. The new book, Lost Hills. Kind of a departure for me. It's a, here you go, sir. It's a police procedural, which is something I've always wanted to write. I've been a huge fan of Michael Connelly's books and Ed McBain's 87th Precinct books, and I think I'm primarily known for writing over-the-top, kind of funny, action-adventure stuff, if I'm known at all. You guys do know who I am, right? You came here later for the Tess Gerritsen signing up. I'm not Tess Gerritsen. I'm like the warm-up act for her. Ordinarily, I tend to write broad, kind of funny, action-adventure novels, and I didn't want to get typecast just doing that. So I wanted to do something that would stretch me a little bit and open me up to a new audience. So I thought about writing a police procedural, and to prepare for that, I did a lot of research, and I had a story in mind, and I got invited to a homicide investigators training conference in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now, this is a conference for actual homicide detectives. It's not open to civilians, but I knew the guy who was putting it together, managed to finagle my way in. If you're watching, by the way, thank you. And you're not getting a dime from this book. He finagled me in, and I just wanted to get some color, some details, some anecdotes that would help ground my ridiculous fiction in some kind of reality so you'd buy it. By the way, that's the big secret behind what we do. We're telling stories, but if we can get just enough truth that you'll buy into it, you'll let us get away with murder. So that's what I was looking for. I was looking for that foundational truth that would ground my story and create a reality that you would find comfortable and would allow me to spin my yarn, so to speak, to use a cliche and sound 100 years old. So I went to this homicide detectives training conference, and it's all homicide detectives, many of whom had their guns and badges, and the ones who didn't were still carrying it sort of psychically. You could see it on their bodies, the way they walk and their stare. And then there was me. Hi! I clearly was not one of the detectives. So it was like high school all over again. At breakfast, they were all at their tables, and it was me in the back. And a detective presented a case at this conference as an example of why it's necessary when you approach a homicide to approach it as if it's your first homicide every time. Not to bring to it any of your police common sense, to pretend as if you've never solved a crime before. Because if you didn't, you never would have solved this particular case. So he's presenting the case, and I just got utterly absorbed in it. And I asked lots of questions, lots and lots of questions. And at lunch, I asked him more. Now, I should back up a little bit and say that he presented the case, but everybody who was involved with the case was there. The initial uniformed police officers who found the body, the blood spatter analysts who went through the scene, the prosecutor, everybody who was involved in this case was there presenting their corner of the case as an educational tool. But the lead detective was sort of the master of ceremonies of that particular seminar. So I went up to him at lunch with these other questions, and he said, "God, your questions are great. May I ask which law enforcement agency you're with?" And I said, "Yes, I'm a top investigator with the WGA." He said, "I'm not familiar with that agency." "Writers Guild of America." He said, "You're a fucking writer?" Sorry, those of you at home. "You're a fucking writer? How the fuck did you get in here?" And I pointed to the guy who was running the conference who went like this. The detective went, "Well, if you're good enough for him, you're good enough for me. Plus, I love your questions. Keep them coming." Well, I think seeing me with the cool guy sort of like won me over with the rest of the cops, because then they started hanging out with me. Of course, it helped that night we were all stuck in this hotel. I bought everybody drinks, so I was the fat ATM guy from Hollywood who was buying everybody drinks. But I couldn't get the case out of my head. I went back to my room, and it was I couldn't let go of it. And I ended up throwing out the book I had in mind and deciding to write about this case instead. I could see immediately how I could change the case, move it to Los Angeles, and make it my own. Plus, I loved the idea of a cop who has to come at the case as if it's the first case he or she has ever solved. Well, what if it is? Why don't I make it my detective's first case? Problem is, to get into homicide, you have to have a lot of experience. So that doesn't quite work. So what if my detective gets the job with no experience and no merit, doesn't deserve it? That would add more conflict. Now, what if it's a woman in her 20s? That would be a challenge for me to write, because I'm obviously not a woman in my 20s anymore. So I knew the whole story in my mind, and so I went to the detectives the next day, and I said, I decided to write my next book based on this. Would you help me if I called you with questions? And they said, sure. So that's what I did. There's a real case behind my book, Lost Hills, though I fictionalized it. And I fictionalized it not to make it more unusual, but to make it more grounded. If I actually use the real case, people would read my book and say, are you kidding? This would never happen. Yeah. It's one of those rare situations where I had to make the reality more relatable because no one would believe it if I used it exactly as it was. Plus, I wanted to streamline the case. I had some clues I wanted to add of my own. There were some elements I wanted to make in the case to help reveal character. But it was a lot of fun for me. When I decided to move it to Los Angeles, I realized, oh, crap. If I move it to LA, I'm up against Michael Connelly's Harry Bosch, all of Joseph Wambaugh's books, hundreds of thousands of TV shows set in Los Angeles about police officers. How am I going to do it any better than them? And the fact is, I can't. No way. Competing with Michael Connelly and Joseph Wambaugh is a losing proposition. Plus, they've covered every street. I mean, what am I going to say that's fresh and new? So, I told you people to put your phones in your pockets. I already had to throw 3 people out for this. Oh, wait, it's the store owner. Never mind. Keep it on. You know you're bombing when the owner of the store is texting and taking calls while you're signing. I hope you guys watching this are not like eating or watching another TV show at the same time. Where was I? See, I completely lost my train of thought. I didn't want to compete with Michael Connelly and Joseph Wambaugh. So you heard about write about what you know. Well, I'm not a 25-year-old cop, but I do live in Calabasas, California. So I set the story in Calabasas, California. So I didn't have to move my fat butt out of my chair. I could just look out my window and write about that. Well, not quite that easy. But Calabasas, which is now sadly famous because of Kobe Bryant's helicopter accident, which, by the way, happened right below my house. I live on the ridge that he slammed into. Calabasas is now well known, and also the Kardashians have made it kind of popular. What's interesting about Calabasas is it's in the Lost Hills jurisdiction of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. The Lost Hills jurisdiction is almost like a state or a planet of its own. It's surrounded by Los Angeles, Ventura County, and the Pacific Ocean. It's an island in the middle of metropolitan Los Angeles, but an island that has so many different socioeconomic classes within it. It's got Calabasas, it's got the gated communities of Hidden Hills, it's got mobile home parks, it has the rural Santa Monica Mountains, it has the hippy-dippy neighborhoods of Topanga Canyon. I realized I could write 1,000 stories set in Lost Hills and not step on any toes because Joseph Wambaugh, Michael Connelly, and Quinn Martin, and everybody else who's told stories about cops in Los Angeles, Jack Webb, they've never written about that space. So that would be all mine. And it would give me an opportunity to look at my own hometown, my own neighborhood, in ways I hadn't before, and to give my story a reality. So that's what I did. I wrote about a 25-year-old Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy. Her name is Eve Ronan, and she's riding her bike along Mulholland one day when she sees a famous movie star beating up a woman. So she plants his ass on the ground as a citizen's arrest. A citizen's arrest is captured by a lot of people on their cell phones. That video goes viral at a time when Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is mired in horrible scandals. It's good news in the midst of a lot of bad news. So to keep Eve's story at the top of the news cycle, the sheriff just keeps giving her accolades. And when he ran out of accolades, he gave her a new badge. He gave her what she wanted. He made her a homicide detective in the Lost Hills Department, Lost Hills Station. So now Eve has a job that she's not qualified for and didn't earn, but she doesn't care. She'll take it. But now she has to prove herself. She comes across a horrendous crime that will either reveal how bad she is at what she does and how ill-deserving she is of the badge, or her natural talent. I'll let you guess which one of the two wins out. But that's essentially Lost Hills. Do you have any questions? This is my own hair, my own tea. I get that question a lot.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
How successful do you think you were writing a woman's character as a person who is not?
The question is, how successful do you think you were being a middle-aged fat Jewish guy writing about a 25-year-old young
You
woman?
didn't say all of that.
But it was implied. It was implied. I heard it under every word. And I mean, no offense, I actually get this question every time I do one of these signings, especially down the whole American Dirt thing where you can't write a book unless you're living that story. I have a lot of women in my life. I've been married for 30 years to a very strong woman. I have a 25-year-old daughter. I have strong sisters. I was raised by a single mother. And I'm a member of our culture in our world. But also, I've written in a woman's voice before. I wrote 15 Monk novels based on the TV series Monk from his assistant Natalie's point of view. So I miss writing in that voice. In fact, my wife, who's French, and I hope is not watching this, go downstairs, honey. The phone's ringing. The dog has to go out. Quick, he's gonna crap on the carpet. She says to me after reading the Monk novels, "Why isn't this you? How can't you be like the person you're in the books? Because clearly you know how a woman thinks and how to clean things, yet in real life you don't know a damn thing and you never pick up anything. It's clear from these books you know what a woman thinks and you know what a disinfectant is and how a toilet seat is put down. So why don't you do it?" Oh, did I mention she's French? So I felt comfortable writing a woman's voice. And nothing bothers me more. Are you laughing or crying? Okay, because I do make people cry. Like, what am I doing here with this guy? What was I saying? Oh, women. I always hate it when I'm reading a book that's supposed to be from a woman's point of view written by a man, and all the man talks about is boobs. Like, all women think about is their own boobs, and how their boobs feel being boobs, and what men think of their boobs, and what do I think of my boobs, and aren't my boobs wonderful? How are my boobs feeling about this situation? I mean, it's just so ridiculous. So I really hate books by... She's like laughing so hard here. I'm trying to be dead serious. I am bearing my literary soul here, naked and raw, and you're laughing at me.
Okay.
I mean, this hurts. This hurts. I'm leaving. He's texting, you're crying, I'm out of here. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How is writing with Janet Evanovich? I was going to ask, are you as funny as her? But I don't have to ask that.
The question was, how is it writing with Janet? What was her name again? Ivanovich. I am so tired of carrying that woman. I wish she would break out on her own and stop riding my coattails. Actually, writing with Janet was an absolutely wonderful experience. I mean, we were friends long before we became collaborators. In fact, the truth is we don't even remember how we met. It was sometime around One for the Money. And so we've known each other through her whole rise to super mega author. But for me, she's always just been Janet. And we'd have annual 3-hour phone conversations. Whenever she was in LA, we'd have a long dinner. And we'd unload on each other. We're just friends. And she was in LA, and we were having one of our annual dinners, and she was talking about some of the difficulties she had collaborating with other authors and how I work as a collaborator. Because in TV, it's all about collaboration. You're in a writer's room, and you're working with other writers. Plus, I wrote the Monk novels. I didn't create Monk, but I worked closely with Andy Breckman, who created Monk. I also wrote the Diagnosis Murder novels, and I had a series called The Dead Man that Amazon published, where I published a book a month, and I hired writers to write those books, and I worked with them. We did that for 2 years, put out 24 books. So she was very curious about that whole collaboration process. I'm going to move over here just a little bit to shake things up and make him wake up. Wake up! Okay. The cameraman is asleep and smoking a joint in the back. It's really hard to move around. And we're having this dinner, and we talked about also the kind of movies we love that aren't being made anymore, like the Thomas Crown Affair, and TV shows we love that aren't being done anymore, like It Takes a Thief and Remington Steele and Maverick, and why don't they do more movies and TV shows like that? Why don't they write books like that? And we had one of those comfortable silences you have when you're having dinner with a friend. Though I know you're finding it difficult to believe there's any silence in a dinner with me, but trust me, there is. I do have to put food in his mouth occasionally. And she looked up at one point and said, "How come we've never written a book together?" I said, "You've never asked." She said, "Why don't we write this? The book we're talking about. Why don't we do that?" And I said, "Okay." And I went home and I wrote an email just sort of summarizing what we talked about. And I also gave her an out at the end. I said, if you wake up sober and realize, oh Christ, I made a horrible mistake, I won't be offended. She said, no, let's do it. And we did. I think 6 months from that dinner, we had a #1 New York Times bestseller out. And we worked so well together. Our sense of humor is very similar. One of the first decisions we made doing the Fox O'Hare books was not to try to imitate Janet's voice. Because if I could write like Janet, I would be Janet. I'd have that same success, but no one can write like Janet. And I think if I tried to imitate her voice, all I would do is disappoint her and disappoint myself. So we came up with a new voice that was equal parts Janet. We call it the Jan Lee voice, or the Goldbergovich voice. It's a voice we were both comfortable writing in that was neither her nor I. And it was just a pleasure, just a joy to do those 5 books. We didn't stop because of any acrimonious falling out or anything. It just turned out when the next contract came, I was already tied up contractually to do other books. I wasn't available. But I learned so much from her about writing and telling a story. And if I'm successful now with the books I'm having, in large part it's due to the lessons I learned from Janet. And we remain good friends. And I wish nothing except the best for the Fox O'Hare book, or a series I should say. She's doing them now with her son, who I like a lot. So I think there's going to be some TV interest. Yes, the young lady in the back.
How do you write a book with someone else?
How do you write a book with someone else?
Process?
Well, I think it's different for every collaborator. My brother wrote books with Brad Meltzer. I have friends who write with James Patterson, and it's all, notice I point towards his picture on the wall, because mine's not here. My brother's is here, but they don't love me as much here at the store. But I'm digressing. The way Janet and I worked is not necessarily the way other collaborators would work. I would call Janet up and say, here's my idea for the next book, what do you think? And she'd tell me whether she liked it or disliked it. And we'd elaborate a bit more, and then I'd write up a page. If she liked the page, we'd discuss that some more, and then I'd do a bullet point outline, and we discuss the points of the book there, and she'd give me her thoughts. And then I would start writing, and I would send her 25,000 word chunks. And she would give me her detailed notes on the chunks, and I would incorporate her notes as I wrote, and I would keep doing that until we reached 100,000 words and the book was done. And then she'd do her Janet pass. She'd sprinkle her magic Janet dust on the manuscript. And I'm not saying that facetiously. It is magic Janet dust. I've stolen some of this dust from her house, and I keep it by my bed to use when I can't come up with a good story. But she just is so good at what she does, and we would call it in television a showrunner pass, when the executive producer does a revision of the script. And she always took the books to a higher level. She would take 2 pages of what I thought was writing that was to the bone, as tight as it could get. And she'd find the one sentence I wrote that said it all, and cut the rest. Like, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I know that one sentence said it all? And she did a fantastic job. It was a wonderful collaboration. And we both would get a kick out of people in the reviews pointing to something and saying, that's clearly Janet. When it wasn't, it was me. Or she'd say, that's obviously Lee. No, that was Janet. Which is great, because it just shows that we fooled them, that it's not possible to tell who wrote what. And our senses of humor meshed really, really well. I think because we liked each other. We do like each
I just
other.
wonder how you can combine the voices.
Because we created one voice. We didn't combine a
I don't know
voice.
how you do that. It's very strange.
I know it sounds strange, but it happens in TV all the time, which is where I come from.
That's it.
When you're hired in television, your job is not to write in your voice. Your job is to write in the voice of the creator of the show, or the showrunner. It's not to tell stories the way you tell stories, it's to tell stories the way he tells stories. So every TV writer has to be a chameleon. And I think that's one reason why TV writers make good collaborators in novels, too. I'm used to adopting, I should say, someone else's voice to write. And you get comfortable in it. But in this case, it wasn't somebody else's voice. It was a voice that we worked on together and came up with over that in the very first book we wrote together. That first 25,000 words was the hardest because we were both trying to find that voice. It was either to Stephanie Plum or to Lee Goldberg, and we just had to find the right balance. Because the story we were telling wasn't a Stephanie Plum story either. It was a whole different kind of book than Janet had done before. I still had her trademark humor, and it was still light and fun, diverting escapism, but it was a different kind of story. International cons and thefts. It just wasn't quite the same thing. You had a heroine who was quite comfortable beating the crap out of people, even taking a life if she had to. So that was a whole different from Stephanie Plum, who I don't think would be killing people.
And doesn't she have a family too?
She has a family,
That
yeah.
pops up and she
But it's not Stephanie Plum's family. It's a different kind of family. Yes, sir.
So why did you sort of take things in a more serious direction with this procedural? I mean, not that it doesn't have funny bits in it,
Right.
but it's definitely, I mean, Eve's mother is pretty funny.
Eve's mother is my mother, actually. The question was, why did I go in such a serious direction? And quite honestly, because it was different. This is going to sound so weird, but money and popularity aside, I don't want to be Lee Child or Janet Evanovich. I don't want to just do one thing. No, it's not fair. Janet's done a lot of other things, but I didn't want to just have one voice. I wanted to be able to do different kinds of things. So before I got locked into doing my Ian Ludlow thrillers forever, I wanted to do something that put a stake in the ground, saying, or planted a flag in the ground, I should say, that I can do something else. I'm not just a one-trick pony. I can do something besides lighthearted murder mysteries or lighthearted action. I can do something that has more heft. That said, I don't think it's possible for me to write anything without some humor. And that's not just because I like to tell jokes. It's because I believe that life is full of humor. I think even in our most horrible, tragic situations in life, it's certainly been true of me, there's always humor. I can give you 2 examples from my own life of tragic things that were filled with humor that informed my writing. A few years ago, quite a few years ago actually, my daughter was 8 or 9 years old, and been a long time since my wife and I had a vacation, so my brother offered to take my wife. Oh, that was interesting. He's taken so much from me, but not my wife. Offered to take my daughter for spring break, so my wife and I could have some time alone. And my wife was looking forward to a week of intimacy. Even though I had work, we thought we'd go to nice restaurants and have pictures of the food on the menu, that kind of thing. So the first day of spring break, I'm going to take my daughter down to Palm Springs so my wife and I can have that week of intimacy. My daughter asked to go to McDonald's for a Happy Meal. Ordinarily the answer would be no, but hey, week of intimacy, straight to McDonald's for a Happy Meal. There was a line at the drive-thru, so we went in. On the way out, I tripped over the handicap ramp, fell face forward, and broke both of my arms. Okay, very long story short, I'm in the hospital. Doctor tells my wife, your husband has 2 broken arms. My wife goes, okay. Doctor says, I don't think you understand. Your husband has 2 broken arms. It's going to be like he's in a straitjacket. My wife goes, okay. Still don't think you understand, Mrs. Goldberg. Your husband, for months, is not going to be able to do anything that you can do with your hands. Long silence. My wife says, will it be possible for you to prescribe him a liquid diet? I have 2 broken arms. I'm in agony, and I'm laughing my ass off in the ER. Later, my wife said, when I told you I wanted a week of intimacy, this was not the intimacy I had in mind. I could have lived the rest of my life without this kind of intimacy. So that was a horrible experience for me, but humor was there. Now here's another example. Now, this is horrible, but my mother was mortally ill. The doctor said she's not going to live for the day. Get your family here because she's not going to make it. So I got my whole family together around her bed. It took, my brother Todd got there at the last second. We're all around her bed. My mom passes away very peacefully. So we're all there, going through this horrible moment. And the chaplain of the hospital comes in. Says, would you like me to say a prayer for your mom? We're not a religious family, but my sister, who likes to hedge her bets, said, sure, yeah, prayer would be nice. So the chaplain does a prayer. I don't remember anything about it, but it was very sweet and thoughtful and a lot of great metaphors that I thought about stealing. But it was a very nice prayer. And then there was a moment of silence afterward. And he said, was that all right? My sister said, yes, thank you very much. He goes, yes, 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 yes. He's doing this victory dance around my mother's corpse. And we're like staring at him. He says, oh, excuse me. I was away for 3 years. First day back, first death. I thought I'd lost my mojo, but I've still got it. You've been great. Sorry for your loss. And he left. And we stood there. First, my brother Todd goes, I have dibs on this. Because Todd's a writer too. But also we realized my mom would have loved it. Loved it. It was so appropriate. But this is a funny story. So one of my beefs with most police procedurals is the hero is always this dark, middle-aged cop. dealing with an addiction, drugs or alcohol, or if not that, he's got an ex-wife who doesn't understand him. He's got bosses who don't get him. He's got a dark past in Nam, or the serial killer who wiped out his family. He's got this horrible, tragic story. I didn't want any of that. And there's no humor. It's all very dark stuff. Except maybe someone who says inappropriate things about dead bodies and homosexuals. But otherwise, it's... I wanted a normal person. I wanted a person with the kind of baggage we all have. No serial killer in her past. No PTSD from the war. Just a normal person carrying the kind of stress we all have. And we all have humor. So the humor, I think, in this book is not humor about the case. It's humor about personalities and family and interactions. And I'll always have that. I don't think I could write a book without it. And it bugs me when I find it missing in other people's... I know who does it really well is John Sanford.
Yeah.
If you read Lucas Davenport books, or especially the Virgil Flowers books, he does a brilliant job integrating humor with police procedural stuff. And the later Ed McBain's, not the early ones, but just the ones in the last decade of his life were just full of great humor, despite it mixed in with the police procedural stuff. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you know who said life is a tragedy to those who feel and a comedy to those who think?
No, who said that?
I don't know.
I think it was Phil Silvers.
No, but
There are 3 people who know who Phil Silvers is. I thought this crowd, everybody would know who Phil Silvers is.
Sergeant
Go.
There you go.
I was gonna
There
use
you go.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So, do you see this series just running as long as it can? I mean, are you...
I am not saying this to brag, but the series has launched very, very strong. It's gotten the best reviews I've ever had in my career. The sales have been just extraordinary. So I'm guessing I have at least 2 books before people realize I'm a complete fraud. The second book is already finished. It'll be out this time next year. It's called Bone Canyon. And soon I'll be starting on the third. But if the response to the first book is any indication, and if I didn't blow it in the second book, I could see myself writing these for a long time to come, and very happily, because I've learned a lesson, I think, from Michael Connelly, in that I'm going to do these in real time. The character's going to grow over the course of the books, instead of being like Nero Wolfe and never aging. The second book picks up 5 weeks after the events of the first book, and if I do a third, it's going to pick up just a few weeks after that. So I'm not so. One thing all these cops are usually in these police procedurals is very self-assured, very talented, but nobody appreciates how brilliant they are. My character has innate skill, but doesn't quite yet know how to harness that skill. And one of the things that really appeals to me about this character, and one of the things that the critics seem to like too, is that she makes huge mistakes because she doesn't know what she's doing. I like having a character who screws up. I love Harry Bosch, don't get me wrong, but he knows he's right. He knows everyone else is an idiot, and he's right. His cause is true. And if he makes a mistake, it's usually a political mistake, not an investigative mistake or an ignorant mistake. When I say investigative, it's like overlooking a clue or something. It's not born of inexperience and not hubris, but my character is sometimes a little too full of herself, too self-involved to see what's going on around her, to really recognize the significance of some things when it matters. Because she's been the center of attention, how she got this job, she thinks she's still the center of attention. And everything revolves around her. And I like that there's some aspects of her that are not appealing, even to me as the writer. I think that's to make the series have legs, and allow me to develop her. Maybe 10 books in, she'll be Harry Bosch, in that she'll have the experience and know that she's really good at what she does. And maybe by then she'll be haunted by a serial killer who slaughtered her family.
How do your characters come to you?
How do my characters come to me?
Yeah, so do they just pop up? Because it sounds like the way you're talking about her right now, it's like she's a real person.
Well, she has to be a real person to me for me to write her or him. Mm-hmm. I mean, Monk feels very real to me. I miss him like I miss a friend. And Ian Ludlow in the Ian Ludlow thrillers that I write is essentially me. Mm-hmm. So that I know me pretty well and what I can and can't do. Though I've had a better love life than Ian Ludlow. God, I think everybody's had a better love life than Ian Ludlow. My dog has had a better love life than Ian Ludlow. I start with conflict first. I don't start with a character and try to find a story for the character. The story kind of creates the character. I told you earlier how Eve was born. Eve was born from this story and the demands of the story. That's how the character started to take shape. When I'm doing a series and the character already exists, The way I come up with story is not to come up with a cool murder or a cool mystery, but what conflict will bring out the best and the worst in this character? What aspect of them, him or her, do I want to explore? And what will be the story that will allow me to do that? Because I think all stories are driven by conflict. I don't think it's the mystery you remember. It's what the hero or heroine went through that you remember. So that's what I look for. And a character that I'm going to enjoy writing. I don't think I'd enjoy writing a perfect superhero type character. The Fox and O'Hare books with Janet, both those characters had huge flaws, which is what made them funny but also fun to write. Though they were exceptionally good at what they did. Kate O'Hare was a fantastic FBI agent. Nick Fox was a terrific con man, but they weren't so good at other aspects of their lives, and that's where the fun came in. And because their personalities were so different.
Do you fear as the series goes on and you do 5 weeks, 10 weeks, you know, so on and so forth, that it'll become a little bit like Sue Grafton, where she started contemporary and then towards the end it became historical?
I should have such problems. Oh, what will I do? I'm still writing this book in 25 years, and she's only moved forward 3 years. Oh, God, you know what? Screw it. I'm not going to do this series. If I have that problem in 20 years, I'll just have to shoot myself. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. I'm just thinking, will I have a contract for the next one? And after my publisher sees this Facebook Live thing, I won't. Oh my God, he used the F word. He talked about his mom's death. Is that guy crazy? That doesn't sell books. Yes, sir.
I got another one.
Fire away.
How did Brash Books come up?
How did my publishing company, Brash Books, come up? Sometimes I ask myself that same question because it's been a very expensive hobby. I was at a conference. How many of you know who Bill Crider is? Okay, so 3 of you. Bill Crider he passed away. He was a terrific mystery writer, a really sweet man, but also had a reservoir of knowledge of this genre and the writers who were part of it, who have been forgotten. He was just brilliant. And I was at a conference. I can't remember where. I was in the book room. I don't know how many of you have been to mystery writer conferences, but they have these book rooms full of new books like these, but also vintage paperbacks. And I was going through some vintage paperbacks, and Bill came up to me and he handed me this yellowed old paperback and said, "I'm not letting you leave this room until you buy this book." And I looked at it. It was called Atlanta Death Watch, Hardman #1. A kick-ass private eye for the shockproof 70s. Jim Hardman and his partner Hump. What? Hardman and Hump? Atlanta Death Watch? You're joking, right? I handed the book back. He said, no, this is among the best crime novels you'll ever read. Hardman #1, Atlanta Death Watch? Give me a break. He said, I'm telling you, Lee, this is fantastic crime fiction. Some of the best I've ever read. You know, right up there with Robert B. Parker and Raymond Chandler and Ross McDonald. Packaged like sleazy men's action adventure novels. Well, gee, I wonder why. The characters' names are Hardman and Hump. Just trust me. Read this book. Now, what I don't understand, I never thought to ask him this while he was alive, is if you want me to have the book so bad, why don't you just buy it for me? It was only $5. You could just give it to me as like a gift. But anyway, I bought the book, and I read it on the plane flying home. And he was right. The book was incredible. I absolutely loved it. And I quickly devoured the other 11 books in this series and realized this man is a master, and no one's ever heard of him. He's only survived in the genre by virtue of people like Bill Crider slipping you the book like it's porn. And I had had a lot of success. This is 5-6 years ago. A lot of success self-publishing my out-of-print backlist. And I thought, gee, if I could do it for me, maybe I could do it for Ralph Dennis. I won't make any money out of it, but it might be a way to get these books out to a lot of people. If I put a cover on it that isn't sleazy, and I talk about what it's meant to. I subsequently found out that Joe Lansdale's Happen Leonard is based on Hardman and Hump, that Shane Black was inspired by Hardman and Hump, that these Hardman books are beloved by crime writers. So if I give it good packaging, maybe it will reach this wider audience. So I went to a friend of mine, Joel Goldberg, who's a lawyer by trade, but also writes terrific legal thrillers, and we'd worked together on the board of the Mystery Writers of America. And I wanted his advice on how to approach the family, the estate, about acquiring the rights to republish these fantastic books that have slipped into obscurity. And I posed this to him, and he had this strange look in his eye, and he said, "We could make a lot of money doing this." We? We could start a publishing company. A publishing company? We could take books like this that have fallen through the cracks of time and bring them back. Plus, we have friends who don't know how to republish or how to print backlist who are pestering us all the time. We can republish their backlist. We could do this specialized publishing company. I said, well, that's pretty brash. There's our title, right? So we wrote up a business plan, and lo and behold, we started a publishing company. The irony is, I couldn't get the rights to Hardman. So we published 100 books, nearly 100 books, before I finally wore down the estate and got them to award me the copyright for the hardman novels. But Brash Books, our model is we publish the best crime novels in existence. A brash claim, but our award-winning, highly acclaimed authors back it up, and they do. We published Barbara Neely, and she's the 2020 Grandmaster from the Mystery Writers of America this year. We published Max Allan Collins. He was a Grandmaster 3 years ago. Our books are, all the reprints are either highly acclaimed, influential books or award-winning books. We also publish books that have never been in print before by brand new authors. One of them, I think, has signed here. Leo Banks signed Double Wide. Double Wide got 2 Spur Awards for Best First Novel and Best Contemporary Western. His sequel, Champagne Cowboys, comes out next month. So it's been great. It's been what my wife calls my very expensive hobby. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking, so many authors die, and then somebody else takes over writing for them. And sometimes I find I can't tell the difference. What do you think about, how did they do that?
I think what Ace Atkins has done with the Spencer novels has been nothing short of a miraculous.
And Vince Gill?
I haven't read the Vince Gill,
Yeah,
but Ace Atkins, he's channeling Robert B. Parker at his prime. He's better at writing Spencer than Parker was in his later years.
Yeah.
And then Reed Farrell Coleman did something I thought was courageous and risky and brilliant. He didn't try to mimic Robert B. Parker at all. He wrote that character in his voice. So he was true to the characters, but he did it in his own Reed Farrell Coleman voice and was very successful at it.
Tom Clancy.
Yeah, Tom Clancy's been carried on by Mark Greaney and
Yeah.
a bunch of others. I haven't read his. I haven't read the Tom Clancy books. It's too much like reading, a manual on how to put together a submarine. It's just with a few shootings in between. Yeah, nothing like sitting down with a good owner's manual when you want something to read. But I'm sure Mark did a much better job because Mark's a terrific writer and a great guy. He'll be here on Monday, as a matter of fact. Being interviewed by Jack Carr. Be sure to come back for that. I got that right, Monday, isn't it?
It is.
All right, see, am I good? My picture's not on the wall, but I will do promo for this store.
Wednesday.
He's coming Wednesday. All right. Monday is, hang on, it'll come to me. It's a woman who's coming here. Tess Gerritsen and Meg Gardner with her brand new book, soon to be a TV series from Amazon. She's represented by Shane Salerno, who's producing the series.
Oh, really?
Just trying to promote that. Any other questions?
What's it been like working for Amazon as a publisher?
What's it like working for Amazon as a publisher? That's an interesting question because there are so many myths about Amazon that are perpetrated by people who've never met anybody from Amazon. It has been, hands down, the best publishing experience of my career, without a doubt. And you will never meet more, and I'm not saying this because they are the people I'm working for right now. Actually, technically they're not. I don't have a contract at the moment, so you can take me as being completely honest. They love books. Not only do they love books, they have a deep appreciation of the mystery and thriller genre. They're fans as much as they are editors. And they're really good at what they do, and they're great at spotting new voices, and they're great at promotion and great at nurturing a series. There's a lot of confusion out there confusing Amazon publishing with Amazon's self-publishing arm. Amazon has something called KDP that you can use to self-publish books. Amazon Publishing is the same as any other publishing company. They have many imprints. They have Thomas and Mercer, which is mystery and thrillers. They have Lake Union, which is literary fiction. Montlake, which is romance, and 47 North, which is science fiction and horror. In fact, my novel, The Dead Man, was the first book published by 47 North several years back. They're great. They really love books, and I get really pissed off when I see the Authors Guild and others demonizing Amazon Publishing as a publishing company that doesn't care about books, that we're just widgets to them, and there's no love of literature there. And I confronted face-to-face some of the people at Authors Guild who were saying this, and I said, have you ever talked to anybody from Amazon? No! You ever read an Amazon book? Hell no! Well, don't you think you ought to talk to somebody over there or talk to some authors who've been published by Amazon and get their feedback before you say they're demonizing and taking over writers? Let me mention some names. How many people here know Robert Dugoni?
Oh.
Okay. Melinda Lee. All right, there's some of you do. But there are writers who are published by Amazon who have sold, I'm not misquoting this, Robert Dugoni has sold 9 million books.
Wow.
So has Melinda Lee. Kendra Elliott has sold 6 million books. But a lot of you haven't heard of them because, I know I sound like Republicans, the mainstream media isn't covering them, but that's true. There's a real bias against Amazon authors in the book industry media, which is a shame, because they're reaching 9 million readers, 7 million readers. No one's putting a gun to those people's head to buy those books. And Reese Bowen, she's published by Amazon now. They love books, and it's great to see stores like Poison Pen and Murder by the Book and Boswell Book Company and Mysterious Galaxy and McIntyre Books and so many others starting to carry these books because they're really good and readers love them.
It's an exciting time. It really is, and they've been publishing some really great books. So
I don't live in a cave. I understand why booksellers are, not thrilled about Amazon and Amazon encroaching on their territory. But at the same time, I remember how booksellers felt about Barnes & Noble and Borders. I remember Barnes & Noble opened a superstore right next door, literally right next door, to a great independent bookstore in the University District of Seattle. And then jump forward a decade or so, and everyone's saying, oh, you got to rally in defense of Barnes & Noble against Amazon. Well, no. Barnes & Noble was horribly predatory. And they were really tough on authors. If you ordered, if they ordered 9,000 copies of your book and they only sold 8,000, the next time they only order 8,000. And they get lower and lower and lower. And they start making demands on what kind of covers you have and whether or not they'd carry your books anymore. I saw them crush more careers. And yet, I've seen Amazon revitalize careers that some authors who are actually on these walls thought were over. I won't mention any names, but there were authors who were told, mid-list authors who'd written 9, 10, 15 books, who were told by their publishers, sorry, you're done. Amazon and Borders won't carry your books anymore. You're finished. Get another job. And they thought they were over. And then Amazon KDP came along, and these same authors self-published their out-of-print backlist, and suddenly were making more money than they ever made when their books were in print mid-list, and they were churning out new books and getting even bigger money. Even money aside, what Amazon did for those authors, emotionally, psychologically, for their souls, remind them, yes, you are valuable authors, you haven't been cast aside, there is an audience out there for you, we just weren't willing to go out there and grab that audience. So in some ways, I think Amazon has revitalized and enriched so many writing careers, and by extension, readers. And so there's more to the story than just Amazon's the evil website crushing bookstores left and right. I think there's also a deep love. I mean, you've met Amazon editors. They love bookstores. They love this bookstore. Their job, they're not out there to try to destroy bookstores.
Yeah.
They're out there to reach readers.
So I was going to ask about that Amazon trend, the ebooks. I'm an ebook reader. I love changing the font size, so it always works for me. But
Security, can you get them out of the store?
so do you see the trend? There's a big trend to ebook sales, and now they're saying physical print books are coming back. Have you noticed a shift in that?
I don't know anything about. I know that I like ebooks because I travel a lot, so I don't have to decide which 4 books I'm bringing with me, and what happens if I can't bring them home with me. I like being able to bring a library with me, but if I'm reading at home, I prefer a physical book. I like to hold a book in my hand. There's a pleasure, a sensual pleasure. This is part of my YouTube title. Sensual pleasure of holding a book, caressing the pages, lovingly touching the fonts until they respond. God, am I sick. I love holding a physical book. If I have a choice, I'll read a physical book. But I've also been known many times, to my wife's dismay, to buy both the ebook and the physical book. So if I'm reading the physical book, I don't want to bring it with me on a trip. I'll buy the ebook so I can finish reading it. But I will say that I think ebooks now are the bulk of the revenue for publishers. And in some ways, financially makes a lot more. Again, I'm not an expert on the book business. Probably better if you talked about it. But the model of sending out all these books and taking all these returns. If you're a big publisher, you can handle it. Brash Books, it would kill us if we did it the way that publishers do. There are orders we've turned down because they're too big, and we're afraid of the returns. When we started Brash Books, I asked some small publishers that went out of business what their biggest mistake was, and they said their biggest mistake was their dream coming true. What do you mean by that? It's getting that big order from Barnes & Noble or Costco. They order thousands of books, you produce the books, you send them out, they take forever to pay you, and before they even pay you, they send you back the returns, and then they'll order more because they return more than they should have, and you can't handle the cash flow and the postage and the storage, and it crushes you. And it almost scared me right out of doing Brash Books.
Wow.
That was really inside baseball. I apologize to all of you. Any other questions? Well, if not, it's been a pleasure bearing my soul to you. I hope YouTube picks up this pilot. Thank you so much for having me. I'll be glad to sign your books back here and answer any questions you were too embarrassed to ask me.
Lee, when we end this, can you throw us out a good trivia question? Whoever can answer gets a free book.
Yes.
All
I'm
right.
sure no one can answer this question.
Uh-oh.